Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and can you please all rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Roll call, Mrs. Kalanda.
Mrs. Applebaum?
Here.
Mr. Applebaum?
Here.
Mr. Jacob?
Here.
Mr. Major?
Present.
Mrs. Mogerman?
Here.
Dr. Ciartino?
Here.
Mrs. Feldman?
Thank you. 3.0 special recognitions. There are none tonight. 4.0 additions, corrections, and modifications to the agenda. I don't think we have any of those either. Number 5.0, we have no one signed up to make a citizen statement tonight. 6.0, call for executive session October 10th, 2012. May I have a motion and a second that the Board of Education call for an addition to the executive session of October 10th, 2012, including any record or vote immediately following the regular meeting at Central Middle School for the purpose of considering scholastic probation, expulsion, or graduation of identifiable persons, including record of individual test or examination scores, 610.021.6. May I have a roll call, please?
So moved.
Second.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
I made
Dee,
the motion.
Bruce, second.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Mrs. Applebaum?
Yes.
Mr. Applebaum?
Yes.
Mr. Jacob?
Yes.
Mr. Major?
Yes.
Mrs. Mogerman?
Yes.
Dr. Ciartino?
Yes.
Mrs. Feldman?
Yes. Thank you. 7.0, approval of agenda for October 10th, 2012. May I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. 8.0, resolutions, American Education Week, November 11th through 17th. May I have a motion and a second that the Board of Education adopt the resolution as presented in the October 10th through 2012 board material?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. 9.02, liaison reports. Anyone want to start?
Well, I was able to attend the Parkway North Homecoming this year, which was a great event, except for the score.
Last weekend? When was it? When
2
did we-
weekends ago.
2 weekends ago. Dr. Sortino, Mr. Jacob, Mrs. Feldman, Mr. Major, and I went to the, and Dr. Marty, to the Missouri School Boards Association, not retreat, what's it called? Annual conference. We all kind of took off in different directions to try to absorb as much as we could, and I think we learned some things and heard some good presentations, and I think others would probably like to comment on what they heard. No?
It's way too hilly.
Oh, yes.
We're not big fans of Tantera. But I'd like to comment on Saturday afternoon, Parkway presented our Project Parkway, a presentation entitled The Power of People. Dr. Marty, Desi Kirchhofer, and Paul Tandy, together with Dee Mogerman, presented it. The room was packed. I think people were really interested. I think they were really impressed at the level of community engagement that we achieved. And it was really a great presentation. I was very proud to be part of Parkway on that day. Also on Friday morning, Eric Leaders presented on green schools. It was very interesting, and we were all proud of Eric.
And it was nice to kind of check the things that we've done
Yes.
already here.
Yeah,
It's
well,
nice to
because
get-
Eric guides
Yes.
us along the right path. Anybody else? I've been out touring schools a lot lately, trying to get to 2 a week and meet with principals that I haven't had the opportunity to chat with before. And it's always great to get out there and see kids and be with kids and see teachers in action and get to know principals and learn about the unique personality of each one of our schools. So I'm really enjoying that. Anybody else? Okay, then we're going to move along. I think I skipped a part. Sorry, 9.01 calendar of meetings. The next meeting of the Board of Education is scheduled for Wednesday, November 14th, 2012, at Central Middle School at 7:30 p.m. And now we're going to go to 10.0 action items. May I have a motion and a second if there, that the board approve the action items as laid out in the board material?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
I would like to remove myself from 10.02.
Okay. Okay, with the exception of 10.02. Do we have a motion?
Motion is-
Okay, then we're gonna, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, they all carry 7-0 except 10.02 that carries 6-0-1.
Okay.
Right, thank you. 11.0 action items, there are none. This is the good part, 12.0 reports, achievement report. May I call on Kevin Beckner, Coordinator of Assessment.
5 minutes to get to the good
Better
stuff.
call our later meeting and tell them to come earlier.
Good evening, President Feldman, Vice President Mogerman, Dr. Marty, Mrs. Kalanda, members of the board. It's a privilege to share with you tonight Parkway's Annual Achievement Report for 2012. Goal 1 of our strategic plan centers around students becoming capable learners who are fully prepared for their next educational challenges. To determine whether we've been able to successfully meet that goal, this board approved 5 measurable objectives that serve as markers for us against which we can measure our progress. This evening, it's my pleasure to report the progress that we are making towards these objectives, and in turn, our goal that all students are capable learners fully prepared to meet their next educational challenges. It's important to remember that this is in fact a 5-year plan, and so by the end of this presentation, we will not be able to say mission accomplished, and that's how it should be, because the goals we set are challenging, based on our vision and our mission that all students will be capable, curious, and confident learners. But what I would like to share is the progress that we're making towards achieving that mission at this time. The first of the 5 objectives is that all students will meet or demonstrate growth towards ongoing, rigorous transfer goals as measured by assessments within and across all Parkway curricular areas. Understanding and measuring student growth is a vital element of our plan, along with monitoring student progress on an ongoing basis and working in collaborative teams as part of the PLC work. Parkway teachers, as you've been traveling around the district, you've probably seen Parkway teachers and collaborative teams and administrators and coaches have all been seeking and have been looking at more student data to try to determine how much progress and what type of progress are we making towards these goals. Our district dashboard has helped, which went live last year, to get teachers and teacher teams more information about our common assessment scores and about student performance in general. Our teachers have been seeking and receiving ongoing training about how to use this information so that they can get access to student data that can inform their classroom instruction. The report you see here is a first grade report that shows longitudinal data over multiple years, and our teachers can easily drill down into that data by clicking on parts of the chart that show which students may not be making the progress that we would hope that they have. Our teachers are doing this more and more, and the PLC process is really facilitating that work on an ongoing basis. In addition to achievement within and across Parkway curriculum areas, Objective 2 states that all students will meet Missouri's required proficiency or growth targets on state exams. The measure for this is clear as they're set out by the state of Missouri. However, after a decade of having a dual accountability system, 2012 has brought significant changes to the targets used to measure this objective. In the summer of 2012, Missouri received a waiver freeing us from many of the requirements of the No Child Left Behind Act. The waiver allowed Missouri the flexibility to put in place its own rigorous accountability measures and determine how to identify and designate schools in need of improvement. Now, there were 2 key changes in that waiver. There were really a lot of different things, but 2 things affect this particular measurable objective. First, the AYP targets that we've come to know over the last 10 years or so have been replaced by state annual measurable objectives. And secondly, subgroups historically performing below the total group are now combined. We'll look at each of these separately just so we understand the measure that we're looking at now. First, under the AYP targets previously, the goal was that 100% of students would reach proficiency by the year 2014. So first we'll see this is Parkway's performance over the last 5 years in communication arts. You can see that Parkway students are increasing in their rate of proficiency. But the AYP targets were set to increase at a much, much faster rate, culminating at 100% in 2014. The state recognized that without change, most, if not all, Missouri schools would have proficiency rates not meeting the state targets by 2014. In receiving the waiver, Missouri was able to set its own annual measurable objectives around the goal, and this is a big difference, before the goal 100%, now the goal to make sure that Missouri is in the top 10 of performing states by the year 2020. So the annual measurable objectives, both for English language, arts, and math, do increase over the next 8 years, culminating ultimately in Missouri being in that top 10 category. These new targets increase every year, but at a rate that, with a continued focus on student achievement, Parkway can meet and exceed. And in fact, in the first year of these measures, here was the state annual measurable objective, the percent that they expected students to reach proficiency, and here was Parkway scores on both English language, arts, and math. So in the first year of these new targets, Parkway students performed very well. The other key change that resulted from the waiver is how we're held accountable for subgroup performance. Under No Child Left Behind, students in each subgroup had to meet or demonstrate significant growth towards these targets. There were at least two inherent flaws in this approach. First, students could count in multiple categories, whether positively or negatively. For example, if a student had both an IEP and received free and reduced lunch, they would count in both categories. Regardless of whether they were proficient or not, they'd be counting twice for accountability. In fact, we see that with Parkway. This is the percent of students who fall into different subgroup categories. So we see that almost 60% of students don't fall into any, but then 25% to one. And then over 15% of Parkway students fell into more than one category, which meant that for accountability purposes, more than 15% of Parkway students were counting multiple times towards accountability. The second inherent flaw in this system was that in order for a subgroup to count for a school or district, there have to be at least 30 students in that subgroup. So for many schools, if you had 28, for example, IEP students, you were not held accountable for your IEP students. In fact, we had schools in Parkway that might have had 28 students meet a category and therefore were not held accountable to that group. So the state identified 5 of these groups, of these subgroups, as historically not meeting the total proficiency targets, and those are listed here: Black, Hispanic, free and reduced lunch, students with IEPs, and students still learning the English language. And they combined these groups into one group called the Student Gap Group. So if you reference the other chart now to this one, instead of it being broken up into different subgroups, that Student Gap Group is now one chunk, and any of those categories that a student meets, they count regardless if they meet 1, 2, 3, or 4 of those categories. Now the impact of that, as far as us moving forward, is that the state also set measures to try to close the gap between that group and the total group. In doing so, we see that this is English language arts. This is the proficiency line that the state has set moving forward for the total group. But here's the proficiency line for the student gap group. You notice that it's increasing at a faster rate. The state has set the goal to cut the gap between that group and the total group in half in the next 8 years. And so that is how they define those targets. So we need to look at, and the same is true in math. This is the math chart. So we see the same thing, whether English language arts or math, the rate of proficiency increasing faster for that group. And they, in doing so, they had to set separate targets for both the student gap group and the total group. So in the first year of accountability, these were the targets for the student gap group according to the state, and Parkway students in the gap group met that target and exceeded the target by 5% in both English language arts and in math. Now, just because we have this one student gap group doesn't mean that that's the most helpful information that we need. In fact, in general, the more specific information we can have, the better prepared we can be to meet student needs. So we will continue to monitor subgroup performance for each of these groups. So in this chart, we see each of the subgroups, and we just look over time, you notice that their performance is increasing. This is in communication arts. We do want to make sure that these lines all keep increasing and that all Parkway students, in reference to our mission, continue to make progress towards all of our goals. The same trend is apparent when we look at the math chart, with all lines increasing over time. In fact, when we break this down a little bit further and we look at the increase in each group since 2008, we can notice that there are some significant increases in these categories. Of particular note is the increased rate of proficiency for our students who receive free and reduced lunch and for our English language learners. Both of these groups have shown gains of around 20% in both communication arts and math over the past 5 years. At the same time, more than 15% more of our African American students are reaching proficiency now than they were in 2008. Again, our ultimate goal is that all students would reach proficiency. While we can't yet say we're there, these signs are evidence of progress in that direction. Our third measurable objective is that all students will take the ACT and achieve a composite score above the national average, with the district average composite score rising to at least 25. In this regard, we can look at our ACT scores both for our graduating seniors, and in Parkway we offer district choice ACT testing to all juniors. Those are both measures that we can look at. So here we have Parkway student scores for the last 3 years. The first of these ACT reports we'll look at. This blue line represents Parkway's performance, Parkway students' performance, again, graduating seniors over the last 3 years. As demonstrated by this display, Parkway students are well exceeding the state and the national average and compares favorably to the ACT benchmark score that they have set for college readiness. It's important to keep in mind that in 2010, that was the first year that we began offering the ACT to all juniors in Parkway. As a result, our graduating senior scores declined from 2010 to 2011. This decline was expected, and we now hope to increase this score every year. That is what we see happening with the 2012 score, with an increase in the average composite from 22.9 to 23.3. And in 2012, Parkway was one of only 2 districts in the St. Louis area with greater than 90% participation in the ACT. Now, in recognition that our mission is about all and not just an average, it is not enough to just look at this number, but we do also have to continue to look at subgroup performance and making sure that each student is reaching the goals set for them. In recognition of that mission, you see the chart here, and we do recognize that we're experiencing achievement gaps regarding our Black, African American, and Hispanic student performance compared to the total group. The standards measured by ACT that are predictive of college success and career success are called the College Readiness Benchmarks. Now, this graph display indicates that our students are exceeding the Missouri and national averages. Here we have the Parkway scores in each of the areas: English, math, reading, science, and then all 4 areas. Here we have the state average, and here we have the national average. So we see that Parkway is exceeding all of them. Along with the increase in the composite score, the percent of Parkway students scoring at or above the national average on the college readiness benchmarks has increased in every tested area. And you see 2%, 4%, 3%, 6%, and 5% more Parkway students are meeting the college readiness benchmarks in all 4 areas this year than the previous year. In addition to our graduating senior score, which is the official score, we also have our junior ACT data. Here we have it broken down by the class of 2011, class of 2012, and then here the class of 2013. 2012 was the 3rd year that the ACT was offered to all juniors, and each year this provides us additional information about our progress. As we get more and more information from our junior testing, we may be able to see this predictive of their senior score, and that is what we see over the first few years. Our class of 2011 had an average of 22.9 when they were juniors. Then when they were seniors, when more students had the opportunity to take the test and prepare for college, their average composite score went up a full point. We saw the same thing happen with the class of 2012. Their graduating senior performance increased a full point above that. And we will be looking for the same trend, likely, with our 2013 class, which we obviously do not have their senior data yet, since they are in their senior year right now. We can also look at these juniors and how they compare to seniors across the state and across the nation. And again, they compare very favorably. Our junior average this year was 22.2, 21.6 for Missouri, and 21.1 for the nation. As with graduating senior results, achievement gaps exist between different ethnicities, and that is something that we will continue to work on in order to meet our objectives and ultimately meet our goal. Even as ACT is one of our measurable objectives for Goal 1, capable students, it's also one of the 14 standards by which we receive accreditation in Missouri. The state standard in this case is directly aligned with our Parkway objective regarding students scoring at or above the national average. As you see, the state standard for high performance is 39.1% of graduates scoring at or above the national average, and Parkway is well exceeding that standard. On the other hand, we're not yet able to say that we're meeting our objective of all students reaching that target at this time. Measurable Objective 4 deals with the AP exams, and it states that all students who take an advanced placement exam will score qualified to extremely well qualified. To begin our analysis of advanced placement test performance, it's relevant to note that in Parkway we have steadily increased the number of tests taken. In fact, increasing that number by 692 AP tests since 2008. And those tests are also being taken by more Parkway students. We see here that along with the number of tests taken, the number of individual students has increased. We have 443 more test takers this past year than we had in 2008, bringing us to a 5-year high of 975 students participating in AP tests this past school year. Remembering that our objective, that all students earn a score of qualified to extremely well qualified, we look to the score distribution for 2012 as well as the preceding 4 years. An AP score of 3 is considered qualified, 4 well qualified, and 5 extremely well qualified. In 2012, 80% of Parkway students taking an AP exam scored at least well qualified. In 2012, 80% of those students scoring at that level means that we are still 20% shy of our goal, but certainly making quality progress. In fact, when we compare this number to the state, we see that Parkway again outperforms, just as with our ACT and our MAP data and our EOC data. Parkway is outscoring both the state and the nation in regard to 3s and above on our AP exams. Measurable Objective number 5 states that all students will graduate and be well prepared for their future as measured by the District Graduate Survey as well as career and college readiness data. In regard to our graduation rate, the MSIP's high performance standard is that 89.6% or more of students will achieve graduate status. Parkway's graduation rate in 2012 was 96.1%, well exceeding the state standard and bringing us within 4% of achieving this objective, and here you do see that line. Additionally, we look at the graduate survey. Once students have graduated, we attempt to follow up contact with each of these students and understand the path they've selected after graduation. The accreditation standard based on the percentage of students who pursue a 2- or 4-year college degree, who enter the military, or who are employed in careers related to their career education pathway throughout high school coursework. Here we see the percent of Parkway students who have met that standard over the last 5 years. Based upon the data gathered, 94.5% of Parkway students are engaged in their intended post-secondary pursuits related to college or career, well exceeding the MSIP requirement of 82.3%. It's important to note that this standard is very difficult to gauge the true performance on, as it's dependent on our ability to track down graduates and gain their responses 180 days or more after they've left Parkway. We continue to work on that. We should recognize this is not 100% of all of our students. It's a difficult measure to get a handle on. Goal 1 of our strategic plan centers around all students being capable learners who are fully prepared for their next educational challenges. To determine whether we've been able to successfully meet that goal, this board approved 5 measurable objectives against which we can measure our progress. While we can't yet say mission accomplished, it's my pleasure to report the progress that we are making towards meeting those objectives and in turn meeting the goal that all students are capable learners fully prepared for their next educational challenges. And it's important to remember that as this is a 5-year plan, we still have work to do, and we will continue to do that. And it is also important to note that we have 6 goals and not 3, and that these last 3 goals are very important towards us making strides in student achievement. Improving learning is our ultimate goal, but it will take exceptional staff dedicated to and representative of Parkway's diverse community. It will take teachers, leaders, working in strong professional communities to utilize data, knowledge, and experience. And it will take responsibly and effectively bringing to bear the necessary resources that will allow strong achievement to take place. We're challenged by our mission, we're excited by its promise, and we're excited about the progress that we're making at this point. And at this time, with the assistance of maybe some of my colleagues behind me, we're happy to accept your questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was quite a report.
I'm sure you were wowed by all the visuals.
All right. Chris?
Kevin, what was your statistic again on the number of schools out there that are actually giving the ACT to all students or nearly all?
Well, this year, I can say that in 2012, we were one of only 2 districts who had over a 90% participation rate in the St. Louis area. Some other schools I know are offering it to all juniors, but maybe more of their students take the ACT and things like that. But this year, Parkway and Rockwood both have in their data where it was offered to all students participating. I also am aware that University City will offer it for the first time this year, where they're offering it to all students. But still, we're definitely in the minority in that. The majority of districts do not offer the ACT to all of their students.
Okay, thank you for taking that leadership.
Anybody have any questions?
Do we offer any prep courses for students?
Like
To,
ACT
practice
prep
for-
courses?
Right.
Mr. Kirchhoffer might be best prepared to answer that question.
Actually, each of the high school does have a program that they run on their own at this point. It's funded through district funds and supported. But actually, Kevin and Lisa and I have an upcoming meeting with the folks who have coordinated those over the last couple of years to share their practices and make it more systemic throughout the district. So we want to make more efforts. Ideally, we want to rely on our curriculum to be the
Right,
catalyst
that-
for the performance, but we do realize that certainly with some certain tips and tutoring, it can certainly increase. I think we probably could have a board member testify that with intentionality that it can increase the kid's score. And so we know that, so we want to get more collective with our efforts
Yeah,
to do
well,
that.
a lot of it's just test-taking skills, learning how to take the test. And all. Is that open to everyone within a school if they're offering it?
Yes, it is.
It is, okay.
Kevin, does anybody in Parkway take the SAT anymore?
They do, but it is obviously self-selected, and it tends to be a small number. And SAT does not return reports to us to the degree that ACT does, which is why we don't see that data here.
That was my question. Thank you.
Do we know the percentage of kids that take the ACT more than once after their junior year?
I do not have that number. We can, ACT sends us a report monthly where they tell us which students have participated in that test, and we update in PARS in our data their most recent score so that we know what score we are looking at. But as far to my knowledge, we don't have sort of the number of which students had a replaced score.
I'm sure it's a majority of college-bound students.
And it has to
You
be.
think you can assume that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when we looked at our junior compared to our senior number, we saw that the senior composite is a full point above the junior
Right.
composite. Given that well over 90% of our juniors take the ACT, to move that composite a full point means it has to be a large number who are taking it and improving their score.
Do you discard the former scores when you get the...
ACT does. And so when they report to the state and when they report to colleges, students can actually select their college, which score they want to go, but the state does replace the score as it goes along.
When you talk about juniors taking the test, I know a lot of juniors start taking it early on in their junior year, August or September, and we offer it in April.
Mhm.
Is there any analysis as to how much improvement, what the strides are they make? Because they've gained almost a whole year of learning.
Certainly. I don't have that information, but I'd be happy to do that research and look into it.
I'm just interested, if they gain a point between April of their junior year and when they finish taking it in their senior year, I'm wondering what the progress is from when they first start, because many of our kids start taking it pretty early.
Certainly, I think that's an important question because it not only might speak to their test preparation and things like that, but it also might speak to the value of the Parkway curriculum. Having added another year of experience and another year of learning in our classes, we would expect that their score would increase. So I think that's an important question. In that year, what did they do that caused that score to increase? What courses did they take? What value did we add? Those are important questions to research.
And about the plan test?
Yes.
Do we follow how accurate of an indicator it is of success on the ACT?
We have been, and thank you for raising that question. We actually have been looking at both the Explore and the Plan, and we're considering Explore being 8th grade, Plan being 10th grade, and they're all owned by the same company and aligned with the same degree of scores. And we do see some consistency in terms of students who score very high on the Plan tend to also score very high on the ACT. And what we need to be working on is actually the students who maybe aren't meeting the scores we would like from their Explore and their Plan, and figuring out what interventions do we put in place, what kind of instruction do they need, how do we focus our attention on them intentionally to make sure that they're closing that gap and making those strides. As far as like what's the statistical correlation, I don't have that, but I can tell you just anecdotally from looking at that information, there is a connection, and we're working in our department to try to increase the value of the Explore and the Plan so that more teachers pay attention to it, set goals around it, try to use that information so that they can, and I know high schools are paying attention to that information and trying to make sure they look at that 10th grade plan and see what does this tell us about their learning at this point.
And I don't know if you can answer this necessarily, but what do we do about parents? Because I remember getting those sent to us, and okay, what do we do with this? Do we do anything more than we
great
used
question.
to about that?
I can tell you things that we are working on is trying to, I can tell you actually from the experience of having been in a school last year, we set up, when parents come in for conferences, sessions run by the counselors to explain the plan scores and how those scores work and what they mean and how they can be used. I should say we did that when I was in middle school with Explore, and I know some of those same things are happening with the plan as well. I'm trying from our department as we send out some of those results to produce some things that help make it more clear what this information is, what it means, how it can be used. So I know that there are things happening both in our buildings and at the district level to try to make sure that that becomes a more prominent score that parents can understand and use.
Great, thanks.
I think it's the plan that has the interest inventory. Is that
Explore
right?
does.
Explore.
Yeah.
So are we sharing the information that we get from that with the students so it can help them in their high school course selection?
Yeah, again, I'll speak again from having been in a middle school last year. We actually had a session for every student that, because we did it in every content area, and then in the social studies class that actually isn't measured specifically on that, we had them focus on that career inventory and looking at that information and trying to communicate that information to students so that as they go into their planning process for high school, they can have a strong idea of where their interests lie and what types of courses they might want to take during that time, and also communicating that to parents as well, so that when counselors begin coming in January and talking about registration for high school, they can have an eye towards, do I need to be taking certain types of courses? What are the science courses that I might need to be taking if one of my interests is, say, engineering? Are there career and tech ed courses that I might want to consider looking at for my electives? So trying to make that something that is useful, that parents understand, that students use, is definitely something that I can't speak systemically, but I know that individual schools are trying to make that happen.
All right, and I had another question when I was reading your report today, and that was on our attendance.
Yes.
The Missouri report that you put in the back here. How does our attendance rate compare to what it should be?
Well, I know that our attendance rate obviously exceeds the MSIP standard. I could also say we're never satisfied with our attendance rate because we believe that students should be in school and should be learning and that we're providing value to them. Dr. Marty has recently pushed us on that to make attendance a higher priority and make sure that students are in school. So as far as where we should be, as far as the state's concerned, we're exceeding where we should be. As far as we're concerned in terms of meeting our mission for all students, I don't think we'll be satisfied until 100% of students who can be at school. If they're ill, they need to stay home, but 100% of students who can be in school are in school and are there on a consistent basis. I also know that if I'll turn to Desi again, I know that we have some things in place in the district really trying to focus on the attendance rate and make sure we're reporting it accurately, that we're following up with families. Dr. Marty has really pushed us on doing communication in a certain number of days to make sure that students are there at a given time. We're working from my department to try to make the reports that schools get, flag when those times are hit. So if a student has missed 6 days, and we don't know why they've missed 6 days, it's not like, if we know that they're absent because they have an illness or another reason, the school works with them. But if we don't know that, and they hit 6 days, we need to begin that communication process and make sure that we're really working with families to get them in school.
Okay, thank you.
Kevin, when we look at our subgroups,
Yes.
there's been wonderful progress when you look at growth over the last 5 years, but we're still pretty poor. So what do we have, or what can we do or can we expect that this kind of growth will continue so that 5 years from now, when we're looking at these subgroups, they actually are proficient?
A big question, Mr. Jacob. Thank you very much for it. I actually think if we look at all the folks behind me in each curriculum area, we're really trying to identify those things that work with all students. I think a lot of the work that we're doing in identifying which students are not reaching what they should be reaching right now is going to make some significant progress towards that. As I've been going around the district and talking with teacher teams and looking at information with them, I know that that's something that's on the forefront of our teachers' minds as well, is what do we do to help these students. I know that we've been focusing on things like culturally responsive teaching techniques to try to get into the classroom specific techniques that teachers can use that might reach certain groups of students that they might not have considered using before. Unfortunately, I don't have a crystal ball. I wish I could say, these things are definitely going to do this. It is our intention that they do, and that 5 years from now we're looking at really that line that's kind of going like this can be much steeper, and that increase we can be talking about how much we've closed the gap. I certainly hope that that's the case, and that certainly is our intention.
I think it'd be fair to say that let's circle back around to the PLCs. I think we really are hoping that really one of the real important things that comes that as teachers meet and use their 5 questions, that they really focus in on those students that aren't finding success. They may not all be in a subgroup, but potentially those are some strategies that we hope begin to surface and begin to work on at a grade level or content area much more seriously.
Thank you.
I guess if I could follow up to that point, the impact of the student gap group as opposed to the previous method with multiple counting, if you will.
Sure.
And then if you didn't hit that 30 barrier, then groups that weren't counted at all. I guess, can you expand on that a little bit as far as the implications for, obviously, first of all?
Sure.
But then I think that's going to have, that has some implications for how that gap is going to close, and I think it's good news, isn't it?
It is good news.
Okay.
Yes, the student gap group does fix a couple of those problems. And other related problems, for example, a school might be labeled as a failing school because one particular group didn't meet their growth targets. They needed to increase by a certain number of percent, and even if they were just 1% below that, you get the label failing school. This is going to make it more difficult for that to happen, where just one group is really causing that to happen. So a successful school, overall, when you look at the aggregate students, is less likely to have that, and that's certainly good news. Secondly, it is going to drive an increased focus not on specific individual groups of students. While we need to be looking at that, it also brings to the forefront a larger group of students that tells us we have a large group of students who, whatever we're doing, we're not meeting their needs, or we're not really delivering to them whatever it is that they need. And so rather it being about our English language learners or our Hispanic students or any of the different subgroups that you would look at, it becomes about how do we reach students who don't respond well to the traditional way that we've always done school. And it makes that, again, instead of being an isolated problem, it becomes this is our problem. We have a responsibility to all students to make sure that they are meeting all the things that we set out for them to do, that they're meeting the growth targets, that they're meeting proficiency, that they're scoring above the national average on the ACT. And I think that's good news as far as really drawing the attention to, we don't have an individual subgroup problem. We have a problem where groups of learners aren't responding like we would like them to the instruction that we're giving them.
Well, and I know it's anecdotal, but every year I'm struck when I attend the Alumni Association Hall of Fame, and I would say the majority of the inductees preface their remarks with, well, I wasn't really one of those high achievers in high school. And I think, Dr. Marty, I apologize, you've had so many experts in the district that I've forgotten, but one of them made the point that your high ACT scores and straight A students are the kids that are good at everything. The ones that are brilliant in one narrow area and maybe bored by everything else are probably in that gap group. But
Very well could be.
30 years hence, those are going to be,
Yeah,
I think, a majority of the rock stars.
It is a huge thing that we keep in the forefront of our mind, that the state tests that really result in scores from the student gap group are one test about some discrete content areas, and it does not measure all things. Now, our hope is with Common Core, it will begin to expand cross content and students being able to use skills in multiple areas. But if you look at, for example, the government EOC, very content specific, kind of to your point. I might not be able to do that, but man,
Or care.
oh,
In all
who
honesty.
wouldn't care about government? But they might be those students, yes.
And then and yes, I have hoarding instincts. This is last year's copy. But looking at the advanced and career education courses, and which was one of the more volatile measures, is that, are we measuring the same thing year to year? Or
Are you referring to the one that talks about college and career readiness? Are they placed in a career or college area that they
No,
intended?
this percentage of total credits earned in advanced and career ed courses. I think that's page 18 of the Bound report.
Gotcha.
And again, it's bounced between 90%, 60% year to year.
Dr. Meredith is handing me the report now so I can make sure that I am seeing the same thing. So what this is referring to, I mean, kind of like you said, advanced courses and career ed courses. And so your question is, how sure are we that this is a...
I say that pretty dramatic swings, and even in the last year. So I guess my question goes to, is the data good? Are we measuring the same thing year to year, or is this one of those where
This is one that
definitions
because
change
we're
and-
just looking at credits and where those credits were earned, we are measuring the same thing from year to year. But what that doesn't give us is an explanation as to why are we seeing these swings, what are the differences. Additionally, if there are new or different courses that fall into that area, say there's now a new AP World Civ course, that might also play into some of that volatility, where if we could say every single course was exactly the same year after year, we'd say, oh, well, then we need to look for a different explanation. But I think that's part of it, is we do, in the course proposal process, gain new courses and other courses drop off that can have an impact on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one more anecdotal question, and that is, I have teenagers, so I hear from them and from their friends things about the ACT. And one thing that I thought was curious was when a student takes a test at their home school, they feel more comfortable and they feel like they can succeed better than if they take it in a place where they've never been.
Sure.
And is there any evidence of that?
There's a lot of literature about that, which is we even do it with some of our grade level map tests where we want to make sure the students are testing in the same environment where they tested before. And so there's actually a long history of that where we see consistently students really do perform better when they're in an environment where they feel comfortable. And often what we even try to do is get them in the same place where the learning happened. And that sort of makes anecdotal sense where it's like, okay, well, I can draw on experiences that happened in this very room to answer this question I'm being asked.
Interesting. And I know we don't offer every test in every school. Are there times when they have to go out of the district to take a test?
Oh, yeah, definitely. For ACT, for example, if there were a specific Saturday that it weren't offered at this particular location, or say if it were West High, or West High was full and they had to go somewhere else, that does happen from time to time, yes.
I really was excited about your discussion about ACT. One of the things, there's a slide that it's labeled ACT College Readiness Benchmark Score, and Parkway, they're all 4 subjects. There are a number. I know, Kevin, if you can pull that up.
Yeah.
We actually just had a meeting yesterday with some representatives of St. Louis Community Colleges, and we were talking about this.
We're almost there, I promise.
Actually, keep
it's this one.
There we go. Yeah. We should feel good about that last column, which means that 41% of our students basically are college ready, viewed college ready in all of the areas tested. And a lot of that, Kevin can correct me, or Desi or others, but that's really based on a student indicating what courses they're taking, right? It's kind of a
No, this
survey.
is, they do report to us that, which courses they've taken in which sequence, but this is actually,
Okay.
in English, they have a benchmark score.
Oh, okay, this is
So like,
actually benchmark,
in
okay.
English, it's, I think, 18. In science, it's 24. And so that's the
Okay.
percent of students who met those benchmarks that ACT set that said, you need to have this score in this area to be deemed college ready, for example, in science.
All right.
And so that's, well, we should still feel very good about that.
Yeah.
5% more students who met those benchmarks in all 4 areas.
There is a survey information we get to where the students actually, that we could compare that with, right?
Yeah, definitely.
But, Bruce, to your point, I mean, we talk about college readiness, not so much career and college readiness. I mean, this is a wonderful indicator, but a lot of it is based on the rigor of the coursework that students are engaged in. Over the years, I've heard many people from ACT say you can have a lot of prep classes you can do, and that's important, but it's really the rigor of the curriculum that students are taking in middle and high school. It's not all of a sudden kicking it in at a certain time, and it's at all across all content areas. So we should feel pretty good that basically in the class of 2012, 41% of the students will be predicted to be able to do quite well in college, of the kids heading off to college, compared to what that means in Missouri and then nationally, which is certainly a little bit lower, which says a lot about our curriculum and our instruction and the kind of work we're doing. But 41% isn't acceptable yet. I think we need to keep
94% of our parents are paying college tuition
Yes, yeah.
that year, so.
Yeah. And I know you're particularly concerned, Bruce, about that. I mean, and as we talk about plan and explore, what kinds of counseling should be taking place with students and parents relative to college readiness, because college is expensive, and should kids be looking at and that's why a good discussion yesterday with St. Louis Community Colleges, maybe that's a good place to start, and many of our students do start there, and that's a good place for many of them to make an entry into college.
That brings to mind another question, and that is that many of our high school students are taking classes for college credit. Are we keeping score, so to speak, or are we keeping track of how many college credits our students are leaving high school with? And
The first part of your question, I can say we definitely have that information. I don't actually have it at my fingertips,
Right.
but we know how many students are enrolled in, say, the 1818 program, or who are enrolled in, I'm losing the name now, the SLU. One SLU and one is UMSL.
Right.
And so they get credit through each of them for different
Right.
courses. And additionally, if they score 3 or above on an AP exam, some colleges will accept that as credit for certain classes. So as far as what's the sort of cumulative effect of how much they're sort of saving when they go to college, I don't know that.
Well, they are saving. I mean, I can tell
Yeah.
you that the credits that we pay for, the parents pay for, are very inexpensive when
Very.
you pay for them in high school, and they're much more expensive when you pay for them
Oh, yeah.
in college. But I guess my question is, that's got to be some kind of an indicator of college readiness if college is accepting these credits from the rigor of our courses.
Absolutely.
So
In
I'm
fact,
su-
just in course proposal last week, we were looking at a new proposal from a teacher at Parkway Central who had already worked with the university, had had her degrees accepted, and the college said, yes, you are qualified to teach this, and those kind of things are happening, and saving our parents tons of money, saving our students time, speaking to the rigor of our curriculum and what we're offering students. So all around, those are positives.
There's another important issue, which again we talked about yesterday with St. Louis community colleges, is a lot of times students and maybe even parents think that they should slow down a little bit in their senior year. They got the credit, and all indications are that if you can allow for college credit, that keeps students certainly engaged, and math particularly is a strong indicator. Students need to be taking math, which we do all 4 years for most of our students, but high rigor math. And if they've exhausted it, they need to find math somewhere else, and a college course would be a wonderful opportunity. Students going off to college will do better when they've been thoroughly pushed, even in their senior year. And I think we heard Ray McNulty say that when he was here, that we know that sometimes the senior year is a big wasteland, and then it causes students to really have to kick it in, and oftentimes take remedial work in college.
Right. I think it might have been before you came, the Post-Dispatch did a report on that. Was that?
I don't think that was preceding me.
I think it was two falls ago that they did about the number of students attending Missouri public universities that needed remediation. The number was just huge.
It was. And I can speak to the other conversation. I stand here as a Parkway graduate who went to college with 24 credits and finished a bachelor's degree a semester early because of it. And that's just speaks to what we can do for our graduates when we continue to offer high-quality courses that universities recognize as quality and grant credit for.
And saves the parents lots of money.
Lots of money. That's right.
Well, thank you, Kevin.
Thank
That was
you.
great.
I just want to say that we certainly have been very fortunate. We all recognize we had a wonderful leader in Julie Collins, but Kevin has really stepped in, and we haven't missed a beat. He's done excellent work, so I want to thank him for all his work. I think we all are very proud of his work and being able to have him move into this position.
You sounded, I don't know where you are, but you sounded like you've been doing this forever. All right, I'd like to call on Dr. Lisa Meredith, who's going to report to us on Goal 1 capable learners.
Good evening. I am pleased to be here this evening to share with you examples of very important work that is currently underway as part of the Parkway CSIP Goal 1 area. However, this is not my story. This is the story of many dedicated leaders and teachers and students within our system. Goal 1 is very broad-ranging and includes, as Kevin shared with you, 5 measurable objectives and 40 action steps. I am sure you did not pack your sleeping bags this evening, and I know it was shorter than some meetings, but due to that, I will only share some highlights of the work around Goal 1. However, I'm honored to facilitate such a great leadership team, and I know that any of them at any time would be willing to share more information about any of the initiatives that are going on around Goal 1. When reviewing the Parkway House, Goal 1 impacts each layer, from ensuring that the mission and vision is alive and well in the curriculum, that our learning principles are embraced through the instructional strategies that we help teachers develop, that we have a system for monitoring and responding to students' needs, and a good assessment system with that we have development to support the curriculum and the instructional strategies, and to the resource allocation to support that. So as the leaders around Goal 1 work, they have to ensure that all of their decisions are based in the foundation of the mission and vision. As Kevin reminded you, Goal 1 is about all students being capable learners. And I think sometimes we say capable and we leave the learners off. It's about them being capable learners who can transfer their prior knowledge to new demands in and out of the school. And as Kevin shared, Goal 1 is measured by many tools. So the rigorous transfer goals, which are measured with our own internal assessments, the MAP and EOC, which are state assessments, our ACT assessment, how our students achieve on the advanced placement tests, and then our college and career readiness, how are they ready for their post-high school experiences. And Kevin shared with you that we are seeing progress in all of those areas. However, it's important for us to continue to monitor those so that in 5 years, we do know that more students are achieving by us monitoring them along the way, not only with our yearly exams, but with our exams, our learning experiences, our performance tasks that would go with MO1. The work related to Goal 1 is like a beautifully woven tapestry with a wide range of vibrant colors and intricate designs. Our work consists of many teams and individuals that must intentionally connect the work of many groups. The deliberate attention to these connections allow for many initiatives to work towards the same goals. It has been about action the past couple of years, and the puzzle pieces show that all of the action has needed to be connected together. As a result, there have been some changes in the way some of the action teams work, so there can be cross-talk, cross-work, so that we ensure that all of that work is happening in connected pieces and not in silos. In the next few slides, I will share some specific examples of work related to Goal 1, and this has been really hard to narrow down. And even over dinner tonight with some of the TLA coordinators, I learned new stories that I want to share. It is just so exciting to hear how this is becoming a part of our work. I have arranged the things I'm going to share around the backwards design model. So stage 1 outlines the desired results. What do we want our learners to understand, know, and be able to do? That may also sound familiar, as it is the basis of question 1 that guides the work of our collaborative teams during PLC. The work of stage 1 is informed by multiple sources. First and foremost, the Parkway mission. What do we guarantee our students, our families, and our community members that all Parkway students will know and be able to do as a result of their Parkway education? It is also informed by Missouri's core academic standards. Within the core academic standards, there are the Common Core state standards, which include math, English language arts, and literacy in history, social studies, science, and technical subjects. And technical subjects are defined by all the other content areas. The fine arts, health PE, any other course is what they're considering in the technical subjects. Our Missouri's core academic standards might possibly include the next generation science standards, and we will know more whether or not Missouri will officially adopt those later this year, but we are preparing for them too. Those include process, content, and cross-cutting experiences. Stage 1 is informed by our grade level expectations and course level expectations as we transition into Common Core, as well as the course level expectations that will remain after Common Core is here. We'll have both. And the career pathway standards. All of these influences together help us determine what should go in our Stage 1, and they all align or feed into the college and career ready standards. So what are some specific examples? As curriculum for all content areas is reviewed, the guaranteed essential learning outcomes are being revised to align with those multiple sources just described. So this is an example of a new unit for reading in 4th grade that is a result of a realignment to mission and vision and to the Common Core. So let's look at the descriptor, and it's hard to read, so I'm going to read aloud to you, even though not best practice, but we're going to do it here. This unit teaches students to read with a critical lens, thinking about author's message and purpose, seeing things from multiple perspectives, and reading to learn more about the world and others. Students will have the opportunity to read literature and informational text to think about some of the following big ideas. Seeing both sides of a story, including the perspectives that are represented and those that might be missing from the text. That we want our 4th graders to be reading through perspectives that may be different from their own. That they can think of windows and mirrors and consider questions like, how does this person look like me? What ways are we not the same? How are our lives similar and different? For our fourth grade students to be strengthening or changing their own views as they read and learn about the views of others, and to consider different points of view on the same topic. As you can see, this is aligned with the Parkway vision statements of understanding people who are similar to us and people who are different. In addition, it asks students to think about multiple text at a higher level as required by the Common Core standards. It also requires students to be a critical consumer of text and information. Think about considering who wasn't presented in the story or the nonfiction text. What's the author's message? What bias is there by who's not there? Pretty critical thinking for a fourth grader. To achieve Goal 1, students must be able to transfer their new learning. As a result, curriculum action teams are working to develop transfer goals. Curriculum coordinators are leading conversations to identify places for authentic transfer across curricular areas. For example, Ron and Sandy are currently looking at a connection between a music unit and a movement unit in health and PE. And where do those standards support each other for transfer across the content areas? The action team that is working on Cornerstone assessments is also helping us think about transfer. They have created a draft of transfer goals that are multidisciplinary, and this complete document was in your artifacts. But I want us to take a moment and just look at a couple of these. That we want our students to be able to analyze, synthesize, and evaluate information from a variety of sources. Doesn't matter the content area, but can they pull all of their prior learning and transfer it to do that? That our students can say, I can solve real-world problems I have never seen using my background knowledge. That we want our students to be able to say, I can anticipate future problems and flexibly respond. Those are transfer goals. You will learn more about the Cornerstone assessments at the next board meeting whenever you get the Goal 2 update. So stage 2 in the backwards design model helps us think about the question, how will we know our students understand, know, and are able to utilize the knowledge and skills they have learned? Once again, this may sound familiar, as our collaborative teams and PLCs are using this same question to think about their instruction and how students are responding. So I've shared with you some of the I can statements from the Cornerstone action team. Just to show you a little bit more of their work, and this artifact was in your file as well, there was the timeline of when they were going to begin doing some work. They worked last year at defining what Cornerstone assessments would be and the I can statements. But what was really exciting about this is this summer they continued working, and it was teachers, administrators, coordinators, and most importantly, students from all levels who came to help do this work to help us plan for identifying real-world problems, or to help, how do we help students identify real-world problems. And again, you'll hear more detail about this next month. Also within stage 2, our DAD, or our used to be called DAD and PM&I, which is now Assessment and Progress Monitoring Action Team, I'm getting it, has worked on helping bring clarity to district benchmark assessments, or fondly referred to as DBAs. So last year, this team, along with curriculum coordinators, helped come up with an agreed upon definition, guidelines, and expectations for DBAs. These assessments will allow us the opportunity to assess across content areas within our district. The coordinators, as an example, Toby, Susan Irby, the coordinator for elementary ELA, and Carol Conan, this summer will be working with a group of teachers to design assessments that will assess content from all 3 subject areas in a single assessment, so that we can not only assess transfer, but we can help alleviate some of the assessment fatigue that we are hearing about from our students and our teachers. You have also heard evidence of other district common assessments, which would be considered a DBA, through the Algebra 1 work session that you participated in this summer, where you heard teachers and students talk about the common assessments that allowed the students and teachers to have specific response feedback to how the students were performing. So we are hearing and using more and more district benchmark and common assessments. In addition, under Stage 2, you had an artifact that gave a timeline of work related to the action step of grading practices and providing feedback. So if we look at this, we see that there are many venues to bring in multiple stakeholders to the conversation around what do we believe about grading, what do we believe about feedback, and how do we improve our system so that our feedback is meaningful and that it is timely and that it helps the students and families both. And you can see that the plan is by the end of the 2012-13 school year, that would be this year, to have a recommendation and a plan of how we can clearly improve our reporting and grading system. Throughout the district, many teachers and teams have focused on the action step related to student goal setting, which also falls under Stage 2. This is a critical part, as assessment should not be something that is done to students. We want the students to come on the journey with us of assessing. So this is a snapshot of a second grader's work from last week. So the student had completed some writing, and they looked at their writing against the district common scoring guide. And through the conference with the teacher, the student, you can see they put the goal there under where that pink circle is, set the goal for themselves that they were going to use more combining words. So they wrote their goal on a stairs and stars sheet. So my goal is to use at least 4 linking words, such as and because. So the student will use these stairs and stars to monitor their growth as they work towards this goal. And in addition, developed a couple of action steps of what they're going to do to help themselves be successful. So this student is going to reread their writing to add and, but, or because to the sentences. And the second grader is going to write 2 short sentences together. So not only setting a goal, but thinking about how will I achieve. I'm going to add a quick example that I heard this evening about a high school class where the students were building some non-linguistic representations regarding what they were learning, but at the end the teacher asked the students to go put their self-assessment up, and they had something to indicate their name, and they put it on, I'm getting it, I got it, I'm getting it, I'm confused, or some category like that. So then the teacher could quickly look at that and know how she needed to guide her assessment tomorrow. So the students were self-assessing, but also giving the students are giving the teacher information to plan her instruction. It really is, student self-assessment and goal setting is becoming an integral part in most of our classrooms. Finally, under Stage 2, we have the next generation assessments, which will be here in the year 2014-15. We will implement a next generation assessment system that will be aligned to the Common Core state standards, and will present our students with questions that require higher level thinking as well as more application problems. And I had a copy of a 5th grade example that I was going to give you to take home and do this evening and turn back in for Amy to grade. And it's laying on the copy machine at ISC, so if you'd like it, I will send it to you. And interesting, I will send it. I think you'll be quite intrigued. Kevin showed this to the assessment action team yesterday. Just incredible conversation to think about what will be asked about of our students. So Stage 3. If I can turn my pages. The final yet critical stage of designing backwards, Stage 3. How will we design learning experiences to ensure all students achieve the desired outcomes? We should not be surprised whenever we give a final assessment. We should know, because we should be assessing and then designing with precision. So how do we do that? Within our collaborative teams, teachers are talking about 3 questions related to Stage 3. What will we do when students do not understand or yet know? What will we do when they already understand? And what instructional best practices will ensure achievement? So as teachers are designing Stage 3, they're keeping those questions in mind. Stage 3 is the place where teachers bring the craft and science of teaching together to design learning experiences that honor the Parkway learning principles and that are differentiated in a manner to achieve all. With the increased level of students that will be assessed, with the increased level of standards that will be assessed with our new assessments throughout the state and with our internal assessments, with our DBAs and with our cornerstone assessments, teachers are considering new factors when designing lessons. Curriculum action teams and teacher collaborative teams are using this rigor and relevance framework when designing and evaluating lessons. Learning experiences need to entail a high level of rigor, which means we need to be asking students to evaluate, to synthesize, and to analyze. However, that's not enough. Some people say that some of our traditional college prep courses fell in Quadrant C. They were high rigor. They were high content. We were asking our students to do those kinds of things. But we were missing a critical piece, and that is relevance. At the high end of the relevance scale, it talks about students need to be able to apply what they know to real-world predictable situations and to real-world unpredictable situations. So how do we combine both the rigor and the relevance to design more learning experiences in Quadrant D? That is part of the work of the collaborative teams, the curriculum writing teams, and we are finding that partnering with some people, some organizations within the world, within the workplace, they are helping us find real-world problems. Plus, I think you will hear next month that our students helped identify some of those whenever they were working with the Cornerstone Benchmark Assessment Group this summer. We will also, to help us think about Quadrant D, Becky Litherland, I've got to think about the Beckys here, Becky Litherland, Amy, and Jennifer and I have been having a lot of conversation and doing reading around STEM practices, and we are going to be convening a small group to help understand and define STEM practices and principles to figure out how we get those more embedded within our math, science, curricular areas, which those are certainly more Quadrant D kinds of learning experiences. So in order for teachers to design Quadrant D, they need to begin with the end in mind, not only the skills, but the application and the transfer. They need to collaborate, not only within their discipline, but across disciplines, which is going to be very critical as we move forward. And they need to consider how to embed instructional technology in ways that technology is authentically used within the disciplines, which is a different take on instructional technology for some of us. But how is it really used as a tool within the discipline? So now I'd like to share some examples of some things that have happened or that we have been shared with teachers this year. These are some anchor charts that I took in a kindergarten classroom last week. This group of kindergartners were learning about the tools that they would use in kindergarten to help them explore math concepts. And as part of the inquiry, they described and differentiated the characteristics of the tools as well as the purposes, how those tools would help them think. First week of October, kindergarten, and let's look at some of the vocabulary. Colors, shapes, patterns, design, polygon. Work from the beginning of the year. This is another example that Toby has been sharing with elementary teams as he's been going out at the beginning of the year and meeting with them. And he has challenged teachers to really consider the questions they pose to learners. Are the questions they're posing fostering dependent learners or independent learners? And so a few examples that are on this artifact that were in your file. We might start with questions such as, such as something about what described the explorers. But then we might end with questions that are, which explorers had the biggest impact on the Americas? So really thinking about how do we move our questions to help our students think through multiple perspectives, to think about things from different angles, to think about how the relationships happened, to apply it at a different level. In addition, this is an example that Toby sent out to, to 8th grade teachers, and it was growing up before they had to, children of the Civil War. Could you click on that picture, please, if there's a link? This goes to a link where the students can go to artifacts and look at artifacts related to, and if you could scroll down and hit student view, please. So growing up before they had to, children of the Civil War. So becoming a detective, it sets it up. Then it gives them investigating the evidence. So there are artifacts from the front line, artifacts from the home front. The students go in, they look at quotes, they look at things that are said, the way things are described. Then the students are asked to search for a variety of clues. And then at the end, they are asked to crack the case. And here's what that says. After analyzing the different documents, please write a paragraph answering the following question. Through the eyes of the children, what aspects of living through the Civil War would have been most difficult? You must cite evidence to support your answer. Please indicate whether you were satisfied with the evidence and list any additional questions that have been left unanswered through your investigation. I don't think I was asked to think like that or to write like that in social studies in 8th grade. And this is also an example of what Common Core refers to as literacy in history, social studies, science, and the technical areas. So these are the types of resources that our teachers are being provided and coached in using. Thank you. We are also looking at new resources to support the learning. So as you know, we've launched the Campus Technology Access, which is allowing for more flexibility and a larger variety of opportunities to embed technology within the instructional time in the classrooms. And you'll hear more specifics about that next month whenever we have the work session with the panel of people to answer questions. In addition, this evening, you approved the purchase of Lynda Campus Online, which is going to replace some of the tools that were previously used in CTE classes. That is an online resource. So instead of reading a manual of how to do Photoshop, you can go here and you can watch a video of how to do it, try it yourself, go back, rewind it, watch what you didn't quite get, try it again. So what other resources will help our students as we begin to think differently and identify real-world problems and respond to them? This is not only happening here. Through the curriculum review cycle in social studies and in science, teacher teams with Toby and Becky have been exploring supplemental materials and or possible alternative resources for the traditional textbook. And in your artifacts, you saw a table that was put together that outlined the different ways that technology could possibly be used alongside or in replacement of traditional textbooks. As individual teachers and collaborative teams strive to answer how to respond when students need additional time, when they're not quite understanding what the standard requires, they need to use data to dig down, to identify the root cause, and respond with intentionality. This is called the progress monitoring and intervention. The APM committee, under John's leadership, has helped to develop a collective understanding regarding a framework of progress monitoring and intervention. They have also outlined structures and support that can work at various levels for a problem-solving model, from the district level, the building level, the grade level, and even down to the individual classroom, all with student results in mind. To support this work, the TLA coordinators and district developers are in the process of determining the most effective way to use the OCG to provide teachers more resources and guidance in differentiated learning experiences. We will continue this conversation, and by the end of November, we'll have a plan of where those will be housed on the OCG so that teachers will have access to those resources and tools. The adults who are responsible for implementing Goal 1 are embraced by a network of supports, a few which include their building administrators, their own team members, instructional coaches, district developers, TLA coordinators, as well as the math facilitators, and then you, our board members, and our community members for giving us the time for professional learning communities to meet, our collaborative teams to meet. Goal 1 would be very difficult to achieve without that time for teachers to dig in and study and do the kinds of examples that we looked at. In addition to our PLC time, structured professional learning has been and will continue to be a critical action step to continue moving forward. This summer alone, we had a little over 2,700 registrants participate in Parkway Institutes or Parkway Salary Credits or coordinator workshops this summer alone. That is a lot of development. Some highlights: Science in Residence grant, curriculum writing and alignment, problem solving of how to use data, a differentiation institute, an institute of how to use the Common Core standards to increase ACT scores, and institute on how to work as a collaborative team. And I was kind of excited and then had to really think about why it happened. But as I was putting this slide together, I wanted a visual to add to represent professional learning communities. And so I went to Google Images, you know, the kind of the easiest way. And I put in professional learning communities. And know that whenever you search with that, it's partly informed by what you go to on your computer. But in the first page of images on my computer, whenever I Googled an image for professional learning communities, was the Parkway Book Burst. We truly are beginning and moving down the journey of professional learning communities being the way we work and play to ensure that all students achieve and that they are all capable learners. So for all by all, as you can see, the work of Goal 1 is very interconnected. A lot of teams, a lot of people, a lot of stakeholders throughout the organization. I have certainly only touched on a few. You have stories of others in your artifacts and your narrative. And we have a lot of people that love to tell the stories of what they're seeing in classrooms every day. That's what our dinner conversation was about today. So they would love to share more. But it is important to know that Goal 1, this work, is intertwined with Goal 2, Goal 3, Goal 4, Goal 5, and Goal 6. We would not be this far with Goal 1 without the interconnected work of the complete strategic plan. So that's a bit of our story, and we look forward to another opportunity in the future to continue to share progress. At this time, I'll open it to questions and discussion.
Lisa, you've answered every question that any of us had.
But I'm sure they timed me, and I'm sure I went over 20 minutes.
You proved you're very capable. Best I could come up with.
You transferred a lot of learning.
Yes.
We are relieved that you left the assessment on the copier, though.
Yeah. I'm sending it to you, Carol. Can it go in next week's packet?
I will say that sitting here hearing about all the things going on, like we often hear, it's frustrating to us that the community at large doesn't hear these things. And I wish somehow we could, make them more aware. I don't know, but there's so much going on, and it's frustrating. But hopefully the word will start spreading.
Community's probably most interested in results, and
That's
but
true.
I think what we saw tonight in this report, you saw the assessment report followed by the background of how
Right.
we continue to improve. Kevin said we're going to improve, but there's got to be a way to do that. So if we can get the community captured, I think,
Right.
First it's around the results, and then it's how we're going to continue to work together.
And people that have the perception that teachers have their summers off, and then you said 2,700,
That was amazing.
Yeah, when I asked Connie Hayes to pull that report for me, I was really surprised, and I have not gone in and drilled down the data yet
Yeah.
to see, we know some of those are repeat customers.
Right, they have to be.
And so I would like to know how many staff members we actually touched, and we can do that, it's just a little bit of data drilling that
That's very
has
exciting.
not made it to the top of my weekend folder yet.
Do we know what kind of increase that was from the previous year?
I don't know, but I could find that out.
That would be interesting.
Liz, do you know?
That's amazing.
What, is that, how big of an increase is that from the summer before? I do not know. I can find out. We can get that for you.
Thank you, Con.
Yes. And thank you to our technology system who's developed our tools that allow us to be able to have access to that data. We can go into our peer system and pull that up without going back through a bunch of files. Makes the work easier.
We had 1 or 2 teachers involved in summer school as well, didn't we? So.
You think? That was one question I forgot to ask Kevin at our ACT, our college prep sessions that we had at Maryville this summer. I'm wondering if we're tracking the results that those students achieved on their, when the time comes for them to take the ACT, if we can track it, because there were a couple hundred, I think 175 maybe, students that went through that program this past summer.
Yeah, we can look at both their data, their graduating senior data, but also if we get those monthly reports, we can see how those students performed.
Thanks. Sorry about that. I forgot
That's
that
okay.
from before.
I just wanted to ask, how much time are coordinators spending in the schools? And when they are in the schools, what exactly happens?
So that is one of our goals, is to be more present in the buildings this year and working alongside teachers. And I think from what I'm hearing from folks in the building, we are achieving at that. We start all of our department meetings with checking in related to learning that we've observed students. So we're trying to find which learning principles and which standards are we seeing in action, and we can only do that by being in the buildings. And then how do we get those to be systemic patterns, and what about the learning principles that we're not seeing in action? What do we do to help increase that? When they're not in classrooms, they are doing things like reviewing curriculum that teachers have written and getting it on the OCG, reviewing assessments that have been written and getting those on the OCG, reviewing common assessment data. They sit on many of the action teams. Even when they're in buildings, they may not always be in classrooms. They spend time working with collaborative teams or teachers on their common planning time, grading common assessments and planning the instruction. Almost all of them have been out meeting with grade level teams this year, and a new piece with that is, in some cases, they're going in tandem. So Susan and Toby, as they're visiting elementary teams this year, many of their visits have been together, so that they're talking with teachers about if they're learning this in ELA, how can they use it in social studies, or what language are you using in social studies that the students are understanding it, that you could move that to ELA to help them understand it. So it's a variety of tasks, research, keeping up on new tools that are out.
Is time spent with principals to help principals to monitor these programs as well, to assess as part of their evaluation procedures?
Absolutely. I know that Kevin has spent time with many principals looking at their achievement data, looking at the grading principles. I know that a couple of the coordinators are doing monthly learning walks with certain principals. And so walking side by side into classrooms and then coming out, and they talk about how they see the teaching and how the students were engaged, how the students were responding. And from the principals that are participating in that, we're hearing good feedback from that.
Great. Well, I think the coordinators can be a very valuable resource for principals. in
Absolutely.
Really understanding what instruction's all about and how it's taking place and the impact as well.
Right.
So,
Did you mention interdisciplinary kind of work that's underway? Did you say that in your review?
So
Of work that they're doing together?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
that interconnectedness is our theme in TLA this year. And so as the coordinators were writing their department CSIPs, one of the things we looked at is where do we have similar action steps and why aren't we working on those action steps together across disciplines? So I shared the example of Toby, Susan, and Carol who are working on looking at the connection between the library media standards, the ELA standards, and the social studies standards, all the way to the point of designing single assessments that assess across the three. Ron and Sandy are looking at that connection between the music and the movement. There is a group that we're working on the service learning and how that touches across multiple content areas. So that's really part of our work at TLA this year is how do we begin to think about removing some of the silos that are historically present in public education, from the ways we schedule our days to the way we schedule our courses. You know, and the extended learning team, advisory team that's working during Project Parkway, that'll be part of what we look at too. You know, are there courses that could be designed differently to have embedded credit so that you might take this course and get a science credit and a math credit if the standards are both achieved in there. So just really looking at different types of ways to look at the authentic work of the discipline without losing the content of the discipline. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on now with 13.0 work session. There is none. 14.0 policy review, none tonight. 15.0 call for a special meeting. There is none. 16.0 call for executive session November 14th, 2012. May I have a motion and a second that the Board of Education call for an executive session, including any record or vote, on Wednesday, November 14th, 2012, at 6:30 p.m. and/or immediately following the regular meeting at Central Middle School for the purpose of considering 1. Legal actions, causes of action, or litigation involving the district in any confidential or privileged communication between the district or its representatives and its attorneys, 610.021.1. 2. Hiring, firing, disciplining, or promoting of particular employees by the district when personal information about the employees discussed or recorded, 610.021.3. 3. Individually identifiable personnel records, performance ratings, and records pertaining to employees or applicants for employment, 610.021.13.
So moved.
Second.
Carol, may I have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Applebaum?
Yes.
Mr. Applebaum?
Yes.
Mr. Jacob?
Yes.
Mr. Major?
Yes.
Mrs. Mogerman?
Yes.
Dr. Sierra-Tino?
yes.
Mrs. Feldman?
Yes. Thank you. Motion carries 7-0. 17.0 recess. 18.0 we will now reconvene in closed session.